Okay. All right. This looks pretty good. Hey, welcome back to the third of this little movement series. I guess I don't know how long it'll be, but I want to just frame these little classes as something. This came up in conversation yesterday. I wasn't even talking about this kind of movement work that we've been doing in these videos, but I think it applies here. It's sort of like isolating a certain ingredient, but I'd say the point isn't necessarily to just eat that ingredient, right? It'd be like if you were learning about cooking with different spices and you really spent a day with turmeric, trying turmeric and everything, and like eating it really pungently and like doses of it that were sort of strong, so you sort of developed your taste for it. But then the point, of course, is to know when to use turmeric and when to use not. It's not that turmeric is the only ingredient. So I think there's something akin to this kind of movement practice we've been doing, and this one we'll do today, that it's, of course, use it however you'd like, but in my eyes, it's not like it's certainly not the be-all, end-all. And in fact, as a general, like daily supplement practice, maybe it works for you or maybe it doesn't, but hopefully I'm spending time with this because I want to frame, hopefully there's kind of a taste in your palate that it either awakens entirely or develops a little bit for the kind of thing that I feel like I'm good at sensing and hopefully at least decent at sharing for those who are interested. So let's maybe start in a seat. I'm on a yoga mat, which I don't know if you can see or not, but you don't need a sticky surface. I just say sit comfortably. Anything we do sitting down, you could be sitting in a chair. But just start with a few easy or settling exhales, settling breaths. Before we do anything else today, it's just a great place to start anything. Foundation, feeling the support that is just inherent in the contact between you and the earth. And whether you're in a handstand or lying down, there is contact between you and the earth, and that is fundamentally supporting you as a body. So nothing to do with that information. No need to exaggerate it. Just this sort of garden variety support coming into your awareness like a nutrient. You might just notice the difference here for a moment between the thought of support. Like, okay, I'm up here looking down, am I supported or not? And just, it's a little shift, but it's sort of night and day of just being there with it. So being the tissues that are in contact with the ground. There's nothing really to interpret about it. So if this is landing for you, just pause here and keep doing that. I think that'd be a great practice. If it was just me, I might do that. But I was just playing with something and thought, I should make another one of these videos. So we'll roll with that. But certainly what we're just doing to me feels like the foundation. We're going to work a little bit with isolation today, and I just want to frame this almost in more poetic language before we go, that isolation can look like all sorts of things, but it's, as I'll frame it today, it's not about bracing everything to only move a certain body part. Like if you're that kind of, dancer, like that's a really cool. And there's lots of other examples of that, right? But that can be really, wonderful, cool, its own thing. I don't know anything about that kind of dancing, by the way, other than what I just showed you. But this will be isolating, almost just to say listening with the kind of ear that can single out. Like imagine if you were a school teacher. If all you ever listened to were the loudest kids in the class, you wouldn't be a very good teacher, right? You also need to be able to, both auditorily and sort of energetically, perceive the quieter voices in the room, and be able to hear what everyone's saying, irrespective of volume. So that's sort of the poetic framing of that. So let's start on all fours. Again, you can sure get creative if you're not comfortable on your knees. For example, you could do this like seated, what we're about to do, or not seated, what's this called? Just like bent knees, play around. So this is about your spine. So I'm on all knees, and in yoga is the cat position we're going into. But for a moment, I'm going to get my hands comfortable and get just as good of a sense as I have right now of the inner line of my spine. So I can think of just like the back of the roof of the mouth down to my inner tailbone. So for me, there's some areas that I can totally sense and some areas that are kind of blank spots. But whatever I can feel, that inner spine line, I'm going to start to raise it all up as one thing. So there are lots of joints and soft tissues, of course, that comprise what we think of as the spine. So, but still using that language, we could say, of isolation, of lifting the whole spine. So for me, if you can see, right, it doesn't look like much. I have a lot more I could round. But what happens for me when I do that is I experience segmentation. So then I feel like, I kind of have an upper back and a middle back. So what I want to do is feel this line as one thing and press into it and think about it spreading and widening as one thing. So this is what it looks like for me. Again, this work we're doing is super internal. If you're one of the few, I'd say very few people who's interested in this, you already know. It's very personal. So I've got some weight in my hands and some weight in my knees. I'm just thinking about lifting and spreading. And just like when we were sitting, I'm doing my best to not struggle to be somewhere else. There's kind of what A.H. Almas and the Diamond Approach calls the basic trust. I've heard one of my teachers, mentors, Tobin, talk about this too, basic trust. There's kind of a basic trust here, like just paying attention here. Lifting, widening the inner spine, even if it doesn't feel like a stretch, just sort of I hit a block that I can't even quite describe. I mix, sort of leaning in the direction of a basic trust that this is the practice for today, and that something comes of this. That's sure been my experience. Again, it's not the only game in town, but it's one we're listening for right now that can sort of be part of the fabric of really anything we're doing. Okay, so I'm starting to get sort of tired of that, so I'm going to come down and rest, and getting the urge, I'll just go in the direction of the opposite one. So in yoga, this is cat-cow, right? Doing that same thing, leaning in the cow direction. So go back and forth between these two. I'd say not with your breath per se, but just sort of if you experience any fatigue, go the other way. So in this cow one, I almost lost it right from the beginning, especially around my throat and my upper chest. And I think at worst, this sort of subtle work, especially around isolation, can get very kind of furrow-browed and nitpicky about like, well, I just lost the... can get very fragile. So while we're here, just be breathing in wherever you are. Also just the sort of knowing, that basic trust of our strength, our sort of inherent anti-fragility, our not just tolerance, but even thriving on the winds of life to move through us and blow us in unexpected directions. So I'm going to go back to that cat position. I mean, God, could play, again, any of this stuff. You can play with for half an hour. You can be light with it. You can add a lot of force to it. You really can. I know I don't, or at least so far in these 2 videos, I do in my own practice sometimes, but I haven't exemplified what it's like to add a lot of force into a system like this, because it's so easy to have it slip into something else. But certainly if you feel like, to whatever extent you can maintain that sense of sort of isolation with your attention, you can really lean into that, like with a lot of intensity. In my experience, that's yoga asana at their best. That's when I'm doing that or guiding other people through that. Okay, I'm taking a break from that. So we're gonna do a little bit of isolation in both of the shoulder joints and the hip joints, and then we'll call that a day. We'll see how long it takes. So I think I'll keep kneeling just because that's a nice camera setup. You could also very much do what we're about to do with the shoulder standing. I do go with whatever's comfortable. So we're gonna essentially take your shoulder through a range of motion, through its full circumduction, I think that's called. And gosh, I forgot what I want to say about that. There's a body of work, this may go well beyond this, but that I know called functional range conditioning, Andrea Ospina, and a really neat system. But we'll talk about bracing the rest of the body. They call it irradiating. You're sort of tensing down, tightening down so that only this moves. So I want to propose we play with the part of only it moving, but the rest of the body is super relaxed for this. So what that means is if I get to the end range of motion and I start moving my shoulder, you see how my chest moved too, right? So now I'm not isolating my shoulder anymore. So instead of kind of bracing against that, I'm going to be listening for that inside. Listening for that inside. So a good start, I'm going to take my arm behind me, I'm internally rotating my shoulder bone a little bit. If you're like, oh, which one's which? Just that part, doesn't matter. We're just going through for right now, it doesn't matter. Internally rotating and taking it behind me, so this is shoulder extension. And then I'm listening as I start to reach my arm up behind me. I can feel my right rib starting to turn. Right, so I'm going to back off that a little bit and keep lifting. I keep my mind's eye on this being of the shoulder. And I'm raising my arm. My arm bone is starting to turn. I'm really, again, you can put as much intensity as you want into this, but you could say you're really trying to make as big a circle as possible. But we want to be right in that spot where if I try with everything I've got, I'm going to turn. But it's not me just kind of doing this, without my chest moving. I'm really like scraping the inside of the bowl of my shoulder when my tongue or jaw or other hand gets tense. Those are certainly overt cues of like, can I back off a little bit, return. So again, I'm making as wide a circle as if I'm imagining a wall on this side of me. I know I am well through that wall at this point. I'm not up here, but I'm thinking in that direction. I'm pulling my hand back and away in an isolated way. If this isn't quite clicking, you can look up that work I was telling you about, functional range conditioning. Look for controlled articular rotations, or CARs. The articular, anything having to do with the joint space, is articular, or arthroscopic surgery, that kind of thing. So I've been losing my train of thought a little bit as I talk to you, but I'm doing a circle. If you've been watching me kind of matching your arm with my arm, maybe pause this or just do it again and really be in your own experience of moving through this. When you go back, you can go forward. Again, you could really go either way. Often forward, something naturally happens as an external rotation of the arm. And I'm thinking about, again, making as big a circle as I can. Oftentimes lifting up, the back will start to arch, or other kinds of, that's the most common one. Other kinds of tension will come in. So I'm letting those soften and then still, isolating. And this, for me, if we talk about like a one-pointed meditation, it's really intense. One thing I notice is, every like 3 times a second, I'm like, what's for lunch? Where am I? Is this okay on the camera? Like there's so many things that I jump away from instead of staying anchored into this. And I love that. I think that oscillatory dance is part of what makes this so good. But, as hoovy groovy and like be kind to yourself as we all are here, let's make no mistake, this is about anchoring your attention into this movement. Oh, my arm's getting really tired. That came on very suddenly. Now we're going to rest for 12 minutes. Now rest for as long as you want, but let's do the other side when you're ready. So I was playing with this a bit earlier. I might sort of truncate this side, or I might not. I don't know. You can go forward or back to start. This arm for me is really different than the other side. I have a couple significant injuries on this side. At least that's the story I tell myself as to why. Certainly the story makes sense. But this range of motion, like when I get to here, I feel like, okay, I have to subtly tighten something to lift, to go further, which is fine. Or I'm at this really interesting question. Okay, what if I don't tighten anything else? I'm going on a different trajectory now. I'm going much more outward. And I can feel like, my inner ribs sort of ache. I've been doing this kind of work lately, actually very much precipitated by my continued experience being in a body with this shoulder, where been doing some range of motion stuff, which will super increase has been increasing my overhead reach with both arms, like the ability to do this. And like some days, my elbow and shoulder on this arm will just be throbbing. So there's an emotional component for me, or an emotional aspect. And also there's this movement, which also sort of has an emotional aspect for me. So I'm just completing that circle. I'm going to turn around and go the other way. But in no hurry. We're not in a hurry. Biomechanically speaking, what I experience is having the pocket of my scapula and the head of the humerus, the shoulder joint proper, having that be in a good relationship the whole turn, instead of, micrometers of difference can really make a big difference. So this range of motion, we're doing what we're doing, just purely, as pure as I can tell, Of course, there's certain postural muscles just in play to keep me upright. But isolating this movement without tightening anything else. I like doing little shavasana, or a little sit or something. Often after I'll do one side or an exercise, especially in my own practice, like we're doing, getting an impulse to just rest for a minute or two, or even lie down rather than try to do more. I think these afternoon sessions are really good for that. There's an immediate sort of integration. And like a supplement, a little can go a long way. So how are we doing on time? Okay. We're at almost 20 minutes. I I think I'm gonna leave this here and leave it to your exploration, actually, to say you can do the same thing with the hip joints. I'll stand up. I think you're gonna lose my head. That's fine, yeah, because you can see the cord and my legs. So again, I was doing this a bit earlier, but you can play with lifting the knee. Obviously I'm balancing. It can help to have hands to balance or not, because it's not about getting somewhere in this case. It's about lifting, and then as I start to open my knee to the side, almost immediately I feel a sort of tension through the inner groin. So I don't go very far before I'm like, okay, there's the brace. I can play with rotation here. Almost imagine, wherever you can put your hip and you can play with it without turning my pelvis. We're talking about just the hip joint. There's a wall behind me, so I won't go very far here, but that's okay. Right, moving through. It's not, again, I want to differentiate this between just sort of going wherever and it's just my hip, right? I stop when I feel a kind of barrier here, and I could brace and go past that barrier, but I'm listening for like just the easiest place. Where does that total ease stop? And then I go, oh, I'm kind of resting at that interface. And then I say, okay, if I go to the side, and I can be really, really subtle about this, and just barely move, and I think that's good medicine. Or it can be relatively less subtle, though still quite subtle, and go a little bit further. But again, the gist of this is I'm just moving my hip joint. I might do that for a bit on one side. Standing after an experience like that, like, wow, this for me, I feel like a much more of a plumb line through the ground. And then into my left hip. So, okay, I am doing this. Into my left hip. So I'm not just going on one foot and then like, okay, then starting, right? It starts here. And really giving this side the permission to be totally different. Because it is, with or without your permission. So already, like for whatever reason, like, whoa, I just start to lift this and I'm already at some kind of barrier. So rather than push past it or say, okay, put the foot down, I stop. Stop isn't totally accurate because I'm still lightly pressing into the barrier. It might change, it might not for our work today. It is 100% irrelevant as to how much your range of motion opens up. You could try that on for size. Yep. So I'm breathing, I'm feeling something in my viscera. What I guess my sort of descending colon here, the iliacus muscle and the psoas. There was just sort of something like burbling and softening, which feels really good. Sort of like doing craniosacral. It's that sort of vibe. I'm playing with a little rotation here. I might sort of open out to the side. Boy, yeah, and again, I hit a barrier right here. Feel some muscular confusion. Everybody's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What is this, right? And then just, that's wonderful. That's part of why we're here. Okay, so that was very small for me. Again, you might have gone a little bit further, gone with the rotation, extension. But I'm isolating, again, not in the name of contraction, or not even using the method of contraction as much as the method of awareness, sort of very delicate awareness. So again, I sort of rest on my own 2 feet. Whatever had opened here for me now, I should, this is good, I want to do this more. That feels really like important. So I will probably, do a little bit of this actually by myself now, turn the camera off so we could be doing that together. It's been about 25 minutes. Hope it's been a nice practice for you. You might consider when you're done just having at least a moment or two of sitting and feeling the state of your body, of your being, before you do anything else or go anywhere else or lie down. You could do all this on your back too. You could be lying on your back, moving your arms. It's a little different experience for sure. It's much less about the sort of muscular, I don't know, try it out. You tell me how you describe how it's different. I've done a lot of this on my back and I'm just playing with doing it standing. All right, friends, video number 3. I hope you're doing well. It's been so nice to hear from people. I was sort of surprised at the amount of people I heard from in the last few weeks who have said, hey, I'm on board with your little movement series. That's cool. I was a little surprised. So glad to be here with y'all. Be well.